Hello and welcome friends. In the last lecture that we had, we talked about attitude and what are the various components of attitude and how attitudes form and how attitudes change. Do you remember this discussion? Yes, and we had talked about measurement, and I said that there are two types of scales which can be used. One is the rating scale, the other one is the ranking scale, right? So today I would like you to first understand what rating scales are that we have already discussed in the last session, but you have to understand how rating scale is different from the ranking scale. So we'll be discussing a ranking scale today before moving on to the problems associated with attitude measurement, right? So if you remember that we had talked about itemized rating scale, graphic rating scale, semantic differential and Likert scale. Now is the time for us to discuss a ranking scale, right? And this one is a ranking scale, a rank order scale. Now what happens here? I hope you recall our example that we took up in the last session. We talked about this particular question that we were posing to our respondents. We were trying to find out what is their attitude towards our products, Dettol antiseptic liquids, healing ability. Now the same question is again being posed to the respondent here, but it has been posed in a slightly different fashion using a different scale which is known as a rank order scale, right? Now what happens? How is it different from the rating scale? Here you are not asking the respondent to do any rating. What you are asking him to do is basically to rank 4 or 5 different options that you have given him on the basis of a particular attribute that you have specified in your question. Now please understand what is happening here. You are asking the respondent to rate the following soaps. Now these 5 different brands of soaps have been picked up, and you are asking the respondent to rank them on the basis of their healing ability, right? And how is he ranking them? Now what he has to do is, he has to do what? He has to assign 1 for highest and 5 for lowest rating, right? So supposing the respondent feels that Savlon has the best healing ability out of these 5, so he will mention 1 against Savlon, then he will mention 2 against Dettol. Let's say he mentions 3 against Lifebuoy, he mentions 4 against Hammam, and he mentions 5 against Johnson & Johnson. What do we mean? What can we infer from this? We can infer that as far as the attitude of the respondent is concerned regarding the healing ability of different brands of soaps, now he has the most favorable attitude towards Savlon, because according to him, assign 1 for the highest, we had told him, so according to him, Savlon has the highest healing ability among these 5 options that we have provided to him, right? On the other hand, he has the most unfavorable attitude towards Johnson & Johnson. That is why he has given Johnson & Johnson a rating of 5. In this fashion, actually, the respondent has for us done what? He has actually provided us his ranks for these 5 different brands of soaps as far as their healing abilities are concerned. So for my respondent, the rank 1 is being occupied by Savlon, while Johnson & Johnson ranks 5th. Is that making sense? So this is called a rank order scale, and that is why this particular scale is known as a ranking scale. And many times these kind of rank order scales are used for demand forecasting. Why? Do you remember that I had in my last session talked about how attitude many a times, not always, and I had discussed that particular aspect also. So many a times the attitude actually predicts your behavior. So for example, if most of my respondents say, let's say this is what most of my respondents, 80% of my respondents say this, that according to them Savlon has the highest healing ability. So they rank Savlon as 1, as number 1 with regard to the healing ability. Don't you think it will actually also lead to greater probability of purchase of Savlon? Don't you think? Why? Because the attitude is favorable towards Savlon, and that is why, and we have said that attitude many a times would predict your behavior. So the behavior would also probably move in the same direction, and people, my target audience, is most likely to purchase Savlon, and you may see that Savlon is selling in the largest numbers in a particular market, in that particular market. So in that sense, rank order scales can be made use of for demand forecasting. Is this making sense to you? Right. Now there was a query by one of the students, and let me respond to that query. How is this particular measurement important to us, and have we discussed it earlier also? And my answer to this question is yes. These measurements are important because we need to understand how our audience, how our target market, how our prospective buyers, how our prospects, customers, they think, what is their attitudes towards my product, because many a times attitude will lead to higher sales also. Favorable attitude will lead to higher sales because attitude results into behavior, right? And where have we discussed it earlier? Have a look at these few models that we had discussed in this very unit. Now have a look at this particular model here. We had talked about the response hierarchy models, wherein I talked about the cognitive and the affective and the behavioral component, right? And we had talked about these four models. I'm not going to repeat that discussion. All I'm trying to tell you now is that there also basically we were talking about the three aspects of attitude, right? We started with the cognitive component that led to affective or the emotional component that led to behavioral component, and this is what our target as a marketer is. If somebody likes our product, that is affective component, we want that particular person to also purchase and spread good word of mouth about my product, and that is the behavioral component, right? However, I had also told you in the succeeding slide that this model only applies to high involvement purchases, where you first learn and then you start feeling about it and then you actually indulge in some kind of an action. This one, right? So I had told you about this particular aspect, that these models apply only to high involvement purchases, right? So you can refer to that discussion again. So this was where we had actually initially talked about attitude. Fine. Now let us talk about the main thing that we are going to discuss today, and the main topic that we are going to discuss today is this: problems in measurements and scaling. So we have now understood how to assess the attitude, how to measure the attitude, but what are the various problems associated with attitude measurement and scaling? Let's have a look at them. Number one, please understand, if you remember right in the beginning of my last lecture, I had said that attitude is a psychological construct. Now, construct is something that you cannot actually see. It's not visible, it's not perceptible. You have to infer it. I'll give an example. Let's talk about the height. Now, height is not a construct because you can see, you can measure the height straight away, right? On the other hand, intelligence, can you measure it straight away? You cannot. Can you see it? You cannot. Is it as perceptible as height of some individual? You can, just by looking at two individuals, you can tell which one is taller and which one is having a shorter height. On the other hand, just by looking at two individuals, can you tell which one is more intelligent, which one is less? You cannot. So, intelligence is a construct, and now what you do then, you pose them, these two individuals, some questions just to understand how intelligent they are, just to assess their intelligence level, because you simply cannot see intelligence as you are seeing the height, right? So you pose them some questions, and based on the responses you infer whether they are intelligent, which one of the two is more intelligent and which one of the two is less intelligent. Is this fine? Got it? So likewise, attitudes also cannot be seen. They have to be inferred from some other aspects. They have to be inferred from behavior. Just like you inferred intelligence from the responses given by these two individuals, you are also trying to infer attitudes by looking at, by observing their behavior. I'll give an example. If you want to know what is the attitude of this particular individual towards smoking cigarettes. Now let's say you are interested in getting married to a boy. right? He's a batchmate of yours, but you want to know because you have a very unfavorable attitude towards smoking cigarettes. So you want to understand, find out what is the attitude of this boy. Let's call him Salman. So you want to find out what is the attitude of Salman towards smoking cigarettes. Now, so you go to a party and then you see that Salman is not smoking at all. He's not even going near to the counter where the cigarettes are being offered to the guests. Now, based on this observation, you infer that probably Salman has an unfavorable attitude towards smoking. And you are really happy now, because now since you also have that kind of an attitude, so now you think that you would not have any problem marrying this guy because he also has an unfavorable attitude towards smoking cigarettes. Fine, right? So many a times what you do, since you do not know, you cannot simply see the attitude of an individual, you try to infer it. You try to make a guess about his attitude by looking at his behavior, by observing his behavior. In this particular case, you observed Salman and you found out that since he is not going to the counter where cigarettes are being offered to the guest, so you feel that probably he's having an unfavorable attitude towards smoking cigarettes. This is fine, but therein comes the problem. Your inference that you have drawn based on that particular observation may be wrong. It might so be the case that in the same party, Salman's father is also there, and the father is also very strict, and because of which Salman, though he wanted to have a smoke, just because of his father also being present in the same party, and just because he was wary of being scolded by his father, he never went to the counter where cigarettes were being offered to the guests. Do you understand the whole thing now? Your inference could have been wrong. Your inference was in fact wrong just because you probably did not take into account other conditions which were impacting the behavior of the individual, which were impacting the behavior of Salman Khan, which were not allowing him to go to the counter where the cigarettes were being offered. So what is the problem with these kind of inferences? They might be wrong. And likewise, when you are observing an attitude, the inference that you are drawing may be wrong. For example, if you look at a girl, let's say you are a boy, 22, 23 years of age, and you look at a girl and the girl smiles at you, and you infer from this behavior of hers that she is interested in you. Your inference could be right, that she might be having a favorable attitude towards you, but it may also be wrong. The girl may be a courteous lady and she is in the habit of smiling at everybody, not only you. And if this is the case, your inference that you have drawn is absolutely wrong. So you probably thought that that particular lady has a favorable attitude towards you just because she was smiling at you, but that was not the case. She was smiling at you just because she was in the habit of smiling at everybody. Just because she was courteous. Is that fine? So you may draw a wrong inference about the attitude. Fine? So this is one problem. So when you rely on observation to assess somebody's attitude, you may draw a wrong inference about his or her attitude. Now let's talk about the other method that you use. You many a times use surveys. If you remember, in our last discussion, we talked about the various scales that you generally use in surveys. So you are posing questions to your respondents to understand, to assess their attitude towards your product or brand. But therein also, there is a problem that some of the respondents may offer you dishonest responses. The responses which actually are not exactly as per their attitude. And why would they do that? Because they are providing you those kind of responses which are socially acceptable. Because they are worried of social backlash. I'll give you an example to make you understand this thing better. Suppose you are posing this question to your respondents. Do you think taking bribes is good? And you have posed your respondents this question. Most of the respondents would respond that they don't think that taking bribe is good. Why? Because they understand that if the response is that taking bribe is good, that will lead to a negative perception about them in the mind of the interviewer, in the mind of the researcher. And that is why they provide dishonest answers. Though they have been taking bribes, they provide a dishonest answer that they don't think taking bribe is good, just because they are worried of what the other people would think if I tell them honestly what I think about bribes. This is fine. So many a times in surveys also, if you try to assess the attitude, many a times there would be dishonest and socially acceptable responses given by respondents, and this would not let you assess the attitude of the respondent accurately. Again, expression of attitude depends on conducive conditions. I have talked about this particular aspect. Attitude will lead to a congruent behavior. There will be a congruence, similarity in attitude and behavior only if there are conducive conditions. For example, I have taken up this example earlier. You are absolutely against dowry. You have an extremely unfavorable attitude towards dowry, but when you are getting married, you offered dowry because everybody else in the society was doing that. Your parents were also forcing you not to oppose dowry, and your friends and family members also opposed. So you were not willing to go against them, and that is why, though your attitude was absolutely against dowry, you gave dowry in your marriage, or you took dowry, you received dowry in your marriage. Right? Why? Because you were forced by the societal norms, by the social practices, by the beliefs and the attitudes of your near and dear ones, your relatives and friends. On the other hand, let's take an example of an individual who is absolutely against dowry, and he has got supportive parents, supportive friends, and they support him as far as this particular decision of taking dowry is concerned. So they support him. So naturally this person would never ever take dowry because his attitude is unfavorable towards dowry. So he would not be asking for dowry when he gets married. Right? So the reason is there everybody else was supporting him. So conducive conditions have to be there. Then only your attitude would lead to behavior. For example, do you remember my Salman Khan example? So you like this guy? Salman never went to that counter where the cigarettes were being offered to the guest. Why? Because there were not conducive conditions for his attitude to result into behavior. His father was there. Had his father not been there, had there been no pressure on him, he would certainly have gone to that particular counter, and he would certainly have asked for cigarette there. So for the expression of attitude, there needs to be conducive conditions. So many a times what will happen is you are observing somebody and you are making a wrong inference about his attitude just because there are not conducive conditions are not there for his attitude to result into behavior. Right? So his attitude is against dowry, but that particular individual has supported dowry. Why? Because his parents were forcing him to. But based on this observation, if you start coming to the conclusion that that individual is not against dowry, then that would probably be a wrong conclusion. So this is again one issue as far as the measurement of attitude is concerned. Now how do we solve these issues as far as measurement of attitude is concerned? For that, now we have got some new tools and techniques which have come up only recently. One is known as brain imaging. Now brain imaging, what happens, please understand, these are two images which I have just used here just for illustration. Now please understand, there are certain regions in your brain which see an increased activity when you are happy. For example, there are some regions in your brain which are active when you are happy. There are some other regions which are active when you are sad. So there are different regions for different emotions. Right? Now if I want to find out, for example, what is the attitude of a respondent towards my Dettol antiseptic liquid, what will I do? I will use this particular technique. So what will I do? I'll attach electrodes to his head so that I can make use of the brain images, and then I will show him various brands. So Dettol antiseptic liquid will be shown, Savlon will be shown, some other brands will be shown, and I'll keep looking at the activity in the brain. And supposing when I show him Savlon, the activity in that part of the brain which corresponds to excitement, which corresponds to happiness, increases. What can I infer? I can infer that when he sees the Savlon brand, he is excited, he feels happy, and from there I can infer that probably he has a favorable attitude towards Savlon, right? So this is how brain imaging works. Fine. Again, please understand, it's impossible for the subject in this case to fake his attitude. So even if you do not want to exhibit your actual attitude towards a particular product, your brain images would tell me the truth. So it's just not possible for some respondent, some subject to fake here, and that is why I get a more accurate idea about somebody's attitude towards a particular product, towards a particular brand. And this is how it's actually done, right? Then we have got another technique. We have got so many techniques, but I will be taking only 2 techniques just to make you understand how we can go around this issue of inaccurate measurement. Another technique is known as use of pupilometer. Here what will happen is, pupilometer does what we have discussed this in research methodology also. Pupilometer actually assesses, it measures the size of your pupil, which is part of your eye, right? So this part of your eye is known as pupil, and please understand, pupil expands when somebody is excited, and pupil contracts when somebody is not very excited. So if I want to find out whether some individual has a favorable attitude towards my product or not, what will I do? Again, I'll show him different products, different brands, and then I'll measure the pupil size using the pupilometer. Wherever the pupilometer shows the pupil size to have increased, I can understand that that particular brand is what excites the subject, and probably that is the brand towards which this particular subject has a favorable attitude. So this is how you can make use of this new technology, these new tools that we have. I have taken up only 2 examples. There are so many of them. For example, blood pressure, pulse rate, heartbeat can also be made use of to understand how a subject, what kind of an attitude does a subject have towards a particular brand, right? So this is how we can go around these problems in measurement and scaling. Okay, with this I'll conclude this session, but before moving on to the agenda for the next session, I wish to let you know that there is a slight change in the lecture plan, and I had talked about this during the lectures also. Earlier I had only devoted 3 lectures as far as discussion of marketing communication process is concerned, but now I have devoted lecture number 10 and 11. I had to put in just because this was a topic which required a detailed discussion, so I have included. So this is the change in the lecture plan. And now, as far as the lecture plan is concerned, I have already circulated it to you right in the beginning on your WhatsApp group. The next thing that we are going to have is our assessment quiz in unit 2, which will cover all these topics which I had covered from lecture 6 till lecture 14. All these topics would be there in your assessment quiz 2. So please be ready for the assessment quiz, and please also be ready to answer more practical kind of, more application kind of questions rather than just the theoretical aspect. This is fine. So thank you very much for your time. Please be ready for the test in the next